Good afternoon and welcome everyone. We'll try to start on time, although I know there's some people that are going to be jumping in. This is the Summer Catskill Regional Invasive Species Partnership virtual meeting. This is June 2nd, and thanks for joining in on this meeting. I'm John Thompson. I'm the Catskill Regional Invasive Species Partnership Coordinator, and I'll be facilitating this meeting. On the screen in front of you, you should be seeing a slide that has the dates of Invasive Species Awareness Week. Also has my email address, the CRISP, or the Catskill Regional Invasive Species Partnership website, our Facebook page, which I would encourage you to like so that you can see the events that we have going on. We post them on Facebook and our website as we get them scheduled. And you could also follow us on Twitter, which the address is there in front of you. So on the agenda today, we'll have a presentation by Steve Young of the New York Natural Heritage Program. He'll be presenting about rare communities and species in the Catskills and the impact of invasive species on those. We'll also show some New York Invasive Species Awareness Week resources. Invasive Species Awareness Week is next week, as you can see on the slide, June 6th through the 12th. So you'll see some resources that you can use to find those events, or hopefully some of you are already leading some of those events. And we'll also have some time on the agenda for partner updates, and I know that there are a few updates that we'll have. So just a reminder to please remember to mute yourselves, as feedback and background noise can interfere with others who are speaking. I'd like to draw your attention to the closed captioning, which should be at the bottom of your screen. You should see a button labeled CC. If you click on the arrow by CC, you can select full transcript, and the transcript will appear in a panel to the right of your screen. First, I'd like to start off by taking a look at the agenda for today, so that we know what we have in store. If you want to let us know where you are today, that would be cool. I see some familiar names and friendly names on the participant list, so it's great to see people from across the state that are participating, and we're great that you're here, and it's great to hopefully see you at some point and to hear from you. So I just wanted to make sure, as I mentioned on the agenda, I'll be showing some things that we have coming up next week for New York Invasive Species Awareness Week, and some other announcements. And our guest speaker, as I mentioned, is Steve Young. He'll be giving a presentation that will cover rare species and communities in the Catskills. We'll have some time for questions after that, so you could hold your questions to the end, or you could enter them in the chat as we're going along. And then after Steve's presentation, we'll have some partner updates, and then I know that some of those will include Tom Algeier from the New York State Department of Ag and Markets wants to give some updates, and then either Meg or Jen from IMAP Invasives. And then if anyone else has something coming up that they want to enter in the chat, feel free to do that, or if you wanted to just unmute yourself and let us know, that would be great. So I expect we will be done by 3:30 or so. But we'll see how it goes with the updates and things. So on to the next slide, as I mentioned, Invasive Species Awareness Week is next week, and I hope that you are aware of Invasive Species Awareness Week. It's has events every day. This year, I think that it's kind of fortunate that there are a lot of remote events that you could participate in. So we aren't limited to just go to the things that are local to us, but we have an opportunity to sit in on a lot of webinars and other programs that are going on during the week that are offered digitally. It begins with a kickoff on Sunday at 7 p.m. And then there'll be statewide webinars that are available at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. every day. And then we at CRISP have a few events that we're doing, a number of events that we're doing. They include on June 8th at 10 a.m., identification and management of priority invasive species in the Catskills. That will be led by Dan Snyder-Nerp, and he'll go over the priority invasive species list that we've created that we're reviewing every year and updating every year to let people know what are the priorities for invasive species in the CRISP region. On June 11th at 2:30 p.m., the MAMA project, Monitoring and Managing Ash project, will be talking about conserving ash, even in areas hard hit by emerald ash borer. And then on next Saturday, we'll have a volunteer day to maintain our native planting at the Thorn Preserve operated by the Catskill Center. And if you're interested in that, you can email dsnyder@catskillcenter.org for more information. And then one announcement that I have for CRISP is that there's still summer jobs available through the CRISP Watershed Steward Program, which is offered at SUNY ESF. The link is there at the bottom of the screen. And I'll post some links to these things in the chat. And like I said, if anybody else has an event that they want to either mention after Steve's given this presentation or wants to enter in the chat, then please do that. So I'll stop sharing here. And then I'd like to move on to the next section of our program and say that I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce our speaker today, Steve Young, who will present Protecting Rare Species from Invasives in the Catskills. Steve will provide an overview of natural communities and rare species in CRISP and give us a closer look at some of the threats to those rarities. Additionally, he will discuss the role of New York Natural Heritage Program, the information they gather, why they protect rare species and natural communities, and give an explanation of rarity ranks. Most of you, I think, know Steve Young, but for a little background, Steve's the chief botanist for the New York Natural Heritage Program, a program of the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry that's based in Albany. He has a bachelor's degree in environmental and resource management from SUNY ESF and a master's degree in taxonomic botany from the University of Florida. Steve travels extensively across the state, and we're very fortunate that he's here to be able to share his knowledge with us today. And as I mentioned, if you want to hold your questions to the end of Steve's presentation, that would be preferred, but otherwise, if you want to enter something in the chat, then I'll read them to Steve at the end of the presentation. So looks like you're sharing, Steve, which is good, and you can go ahead when you're ready. Welcome.
Okay, you can hear me okay?
Yes, you sound perfect.
All right, great. Hi, everybody. It's great to be in the Catskills again, even though I'm here virtually. But today we're going to talk about rare species and rare natural communities in the Catskill Prism and the invasive species that affect them too. Here's a nice shot of common roseroot by Mike Adamovic, is one of the rare species that I'll talk a little bit about later too. So first I'd like to give you some background on the Heritage Program and talk about how we gather information and so you can see how that information comes into play with invasive species. So we are a program of SUNY ESF, and on the lower right, on the lower left there, and we provide information and data to facilitate conservation of New York's biodiversity. We are housed in the DEC and State Parks building in downtown Albany, and those two organizations are our conservation partners, and we share goals with them. So our main mission is to inventory and survey rare plants and animals, ecological communities, and we also have the IMAP Invasives program. So we're surveying and mapping invasive species too. And all of you are familiar with that program. So I'd like to first talk about the Heritage Program and its ranking. So most Heritage programs started in the 80s. We started around 83. And one of the things the Heritage programs have in common is they rank species with this ranking system of 1 to 5. So you can see G1 to G5 are the rare they are in the world, and then the S ranks how rare they are in the state. So the global ranks are assigned by an organization called NatureServe down in Virginia, and they look at their status around the globe. And 1 is the most rare, up to 3, and then 4 and 5 are common or secure. And then the same ranking we give those species in the state from S1 to S5. So an S1 is the most rare, something that has maybe 5 or fewer occurrences, or it may have more than that, but it may be threatened in a certain way. S2 is threatened, and S3 is a little more common, but still on the rare side. And then S4 and S5 are the more common things. And then down at the bottom, you can see 2 additional ranks of historical, which we give species that are older, their occurrences are older than 1980. And we just don't have a lot of information about them. And then also the rank of X, which there was species that were here historically and now are presumed extirpated. Now, how do we gather the information? Well, we go out in the field during the field season and are all over the state looking at plants and animals. In the upper left there, you see myself, Elizabeth Spencer, who is a plant ecologist, and she also does rare plant work. And I cover the state, private and public land. Elizabeth covers mainly state forests and state land in the Catskills, Adirondacks, and state forests. And then Rich Ring on the right there is our state parks botanist. So he mainly works in state parks. And there's a number of them in the CRISP prism that he works in. On the upper right is Madison, one of our interns. Last year, we hire ESF interns during the summer, and she's using one of our digital tablets to enter information. So we usually enter information when in the field on digital tablets and then download that when we get back to the office. On the lower left, we also get information from professional botanists like Mike Kudish there with the blue shirt. And next to him there in the orange shirt is Dan Spada, who did a lot of work in the Catskills for his graduate work, and other professional botanists. And on the right, lower right, are people from the Leatherstocking Botanical Society. So they do a lot of field trips up in Otsego and the northern part of CRISP. And they provide a lot of information too, plant lists. They've discovered some new rare plant occurrences there. And I'm sure they're doing some invasives work too. Here's a shot of the places that we surveyed from in a 15-year period, 2002 to 2017, just to give you an idea of plants in green and communities in blue. of where we're surveying in the state. And so we're all over the place. Long Island is a place that we go a lot because it has the most rare plants anyway in the state. You can see we've done a lot in the Highlands and up in the Catskills too. Unfortunately, you see there's some big gaps there in Delaware and Sullivan County, so I think we need to do a lot more surveying down in those counties. And here's a look at just the rare plant extant occurrences in the state. Again, all over the state, there are some big gaps, but we still have a lot of surveying to do. You can see down on Long Island where we have the most occurrences. But what we do is when we go out in the field, we look at the size of an occurrence of a rare species, the condition that it's in. Is it, for example, a plant is being eaten, or is it not doing well? We look at the surrounding landscape. Is it within a pristine area? Is it within an urban area? We look at the threats, and invasive species is one of the main threats that we look at. What its viability is, how long do we think it's going to be there? Is it viable for the next 30 years, or we think it's going to be in trouble before that? And also the trends too. Again, short-term trends and long-term trends. And then that helps us to give each occurrence an occurrence rank, whether it's from excellent to poor. Now, my work is prioritized by that list below there, which is I work on mainly the globally rare and federally listed species first. We want to make sure that federally listed species like northern monkshood in CRISP is well surveyed. Then we keep up with the S1 and S2 species, try and get back to them and make sure they're doing okay. And also look for historicals that we get information from plant specimens and other areas that we try and update. And then for declining species also, ones that we've gotten word that people don't think they're doing very well, so we try and do more surveys of them. And then we also do program-wide projects. So we'll have a project where the community people, the animal people, and plant people all work on the same project. So for example, this year, for the next 2 years, we'll be doing a survey on Fisher's Island off the coast of the North Fork of Long Island. And we'll all be participating in that. And we also like to go to a lot of new places too. Like I mentioned, Delaware, Sullivan County, there's probably a lot of new places there to look for rare species. I'll be going down there actually to look at some inland white cedar swamps this summer. And then we have distribution models, computer models where we think plants and animals will occur. And so we try and go to those places and verify that modeling. As I said, we've been around since the early 80s, 1983 we started. So that a couple of years, that'll be 40 years of surveying. Here's Bob Zaremba, one of our early botanists. And you can see we started out using paper forms and writing in all the data each time we went into the field. This was in the Hempstead Plains in Nassau County. But now we enter that information into our digital information database called the Field Form database. And you can see here's a plant list of Mitchell Field down Long Island. And highlighted there are 2 invasive species, autumn olive and cypress spurge, that were recorded during that survey. So we do record invasives whenever we're out in the field. And then we put that information in this database, and then this database also gets downloaded into IMAP Invasives. So most of what we survey in the field is available in IMAP. We also glean information from floras that are done across the state. Here you can see from New York City down to the Adirondack flora, the Catskill flora at the bottom there, and try and find out if any rare species have been identified in these floras. Now, a lot of them are digital too, so we're always looking in journals and other places to look at floras that have been done. And now we're doing work with iNaturalist. So we have a couple of projects, the Rare Plants of New York State, where people can enter data about a rare plant that they found into iNaturalist. I also have a collector project, which collects observations around the state of people that put in for rare species that they might not know are rare when they're putting them in. So that collects a lot of information, and we have to glean the good records out of those. A lot of those are garden observations. And also at the bottom there, we have an Adirondack orchid survey, which we've been doing for the last 4 years, and trying to get around to as much of the Adirondacks as we can and entering data into into iNaturalist for orchids in the Adirondacks. All of our information from the field form database goes into our main database called Biotics 5, which is supported by NatureServe. And that arrow points to element occurrences. So an element is a general word for rare species and rare significant natural communities. So all that data goes into that database. And then we have a threats field also in that database, which shows the threats associated with each rare species. So here you see a small list of some rare species from the Hudson River marshes and some of the threats that are associated with those rare species. At the bottom, you can see this is sort of the from most to least number of times these invasive species occur in our database. So Phragmites is the largest one, the most often mentioned. Purple loosestrife, tree of heaven. So most of the tier 4, most of the common invasive species are mentioned. And then a lot of times people just put in invasive species and didn't mention exactly what they were. But now we also have IMAP invasives. So we can get all of this new data and see a lot of the new invasives that are coming up, and also the common ones, but how they are affecting our rare communities and the rare species across the state. And thank you everyone for entering data into IMAP invasives. It really helps a lot. So for example, I just wanted to show too how invasive species have increased over time from looking at those floras that I showed you on that bookshelf there, and how doing the same flora over and over shows the increase in invasive species we've had in the last 30, 40 years. So for example, in the Hempstead Plains grassland, this is a globally endangered natural community in Nassau County. There are 14 rare plant species. 2 of them are globally rare, and 3 of them have the state's best occurrence in that grassland down there. So it's a very important area. So in the 4 dates at the bottom, you can see those were 4 different plant lists that were taken of the Hempstead Plains. So in 1972, only 8 invasive species were recorded. And then it just increases, and you can see in 2017, our last survey of the Hempstead Plains, 34 invasive species were recorded, and 23 of those were very high ranked species, like this Asian bush clover. So you can see how much this has increased over time, and this is true for many places in the state that have done plant lists over time. So what's causing that increase in invasive species? Well, is this a perfect storm for invasives? It seems to be that way. We have a lot more habitat fragmentation from development that causes high deer abundance. We've perfected the habitat for deer, and so the deer are eating a lot of our natives and allowing invasives to come in. Lots of soil disturbance, excessive nitrogen, especially on Long Island. We've got a lot of exotic introductions. Some of them are very old, but we've got a lot of new exotic introductions also. And it's great that we have now the prohibited and restricted list to prevent some of that. And climate change is happening. Ignorance and neglect, we're just not aware of what's happening in a lot of these places. And some of these invasives seem to be coming out of their lag phases. So they've been here for a long time. They weren't much of a problem. Then all of a sudden, they become very common. So we've been looking at invasives since the mid 90s. On the lower left there, 1994, an ad hoc committee was started to look at invasive species. 1999, the Invasive Plant Council of New York State was started. Here's one of their newsletters. And then in the lower right, you can see the full PRISM network then that has come on since 2005. And we've just gotten a lot more information and a lot more people involved in invasive species. And it's really been a big help to reduce the threat to what we're interested in, rare species and natural communities. So let's take a look at CRISP. And one of 8 prisms, you can see it encompasses Otsego County, Schoharie in the north, and Delaware, Sullivan County in the west there, parts of Greene County, the Catskill part of Greene County, and Ulster County, and a little bit of Orange County in the far southern part. So this is a very diverse area, from high mountains down to the Mohawk Valley, lower elevations, a lot of woodlots, a lot of farmland, but still some really nice intact areas. And I just wanted to talk about first the ecoregions that occur in CRISP, level 3 and 4 ecoregions. And if you've never seen this, you can go to Google level 3 and 4 ecoregions of New York, and you can download this beautiful map of the state, and it'll show you the ecoregions across the state. And I'll talk about the ones in CRISP. And it's always fun to just sort of look to see what ecoregion you're in if you're not familiar with that. There's a definition of an ecoregion at the top. Basically, areas that are similar in temperature, precipitation, landforms, land use, soils, things like that, and natural communities, so plants and animals that occur in those ecoregions. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 level 4 ecoregions in CRISP, and then 8 level 3 ecoregions. You can see the Mohawk Valley and the top of CRISP there. Then the glaciated Low Allegheny Plateau, which encompasses most of Otsego County and half of Delaware County there. We have the Catskills transition, which is a large area of lower hills and mountains that surround the Catskill peaks. And then in the south, there are the Delaware Neversink Highlands in the northern part of Sullivan County. The north central Appalachians is an area called the Low Poconos or Mongop Hills, and that's in the southern part of Sullivan County and part of Orange County. So not as developed as other parts of the state and the prism. Then you have the Catskill High Peaks in the middle there. And then the Ridge and Valley section, which is the Shawangums, and then the valley to the west, which is called the Northern Glaciated Limestone Ridges, Valleys, and Terraces, which is a long name. But that's the big valley all the way from Kingston down to Port Jervis, which 209 runs down. And CRISP is on the western side of 209. So, and then the lower Hudson Prism is on the eastern side of that road. That's sort of the border of those two prisms. And of course, a lot of development there. Okay, let's look at the what rarities we have in CRISP. And I'll start out with ecological communities. There are 33 rare and exemplary ecological communities. So these can be very rare in the state, or they can be exemplary. They can be fairly common, but just the best examples in the state of these things. So you can see a lot in the Catskills there, and then scattered around in other parts of the prism. Of course, we haven't mapped and surveyed all of the prisms, so there's still a lot to do. But this is what we have mapped so far. And you can find that information about ecological communities in this publication on our website, on the New York Natural Heritage website, called Ecological Communities of New York State. And there's the definition at the top of an ecological community, plants and animals that share a common environment. And we'll talk more about those as we go along, and the animals and plants that occur in them. You can also go to the web on our conservation guides and look up each individual one. This is a dwarf shrub bog. Here is our existing and historical rare plant species. We have 62 of those in CRISP. Here's how they're distributed across the prism. And again, we have our rare plant status list that you can go to on the web and find out more about them. And also our conservation guides. Here is one for Jacob's ladder, which is most populations in the state are in the Catskills, globally rare plant. And then 57 existing and historical rare animal species. So this includes a lot of different animals, from insects to fish and all those things. You can see a lot of our surveys have been done along the Delaware River in CRISP and in the Catskills and some of the Susquehanna. Here you can find out more in our rare animal status list and on our conservation guides. Here's one about this clubtail, which is a rare dragonfly that occurs along the Delaware River. Short stretch of the upper Delaware River. Very rare dragonfly. And if you want to go look at these maps yourself, you can go to the Environmental Resource Mapper. Just Google DEC Environmental Resource Mapper, and you can look at the communities that are in your area, the pink ones at the top there. And we'll talk about those. And then the rare species at the bottom there in the orange. It won't tell you what rare species they are, but it'll say it is a rare animal or plant. The communities, it will tell you exactly what natural community it is. And here's a map of the invasives that have been mapped in IMAP Invasives across the prism. This looks worse than it really is because these dots take up a lot of space. But there are, if you look at the tier 2 to 4 plants that we're dealing with in CRISP, we have 63 plants, invasive plants, 6 insects, 4 fish, 4 mollusks, 1 crustacean, and 1 annelid, jumping worm. But it's interesting to see the patterns here of, you can see a lot of work has been done in this Catskill transition zone, you know, the Catskill frontier. And then you can see a lot of work along the river valleys and roads that occur in the river. For example, the eastern and western branch of the Delaware River, and up here along the Susquehanna River, and then down into the Cobleskill Creek, all the way down into the Mohawk Valley, and even up here into the Finger Lakes that are up here, Seagull Lake and Canadarago Lake. So there's still a lot of areas, mostly upland and intact areas that probably don't have a lot of invasives in them. Mainly where there's lots of development and disturbance. except for the insects. So let's take a look at some of these communities and the rare species that are in them. And these are really important communities for CRISP and the Catskills. First of all are the high mountain communities. So these are the mountain fir forest, mountain spruce fir forest, and spruce northern hardwood forest. So you'll find these at the high altitudes of the mountains there. And all these are globally rare and state rare. So if we look at, for example, the mountain fir forest in the Blackhead Mountain range, with those three large peaks there, you can see this is where we have the mountain fir forest mapped. We don't have all these communities mapped in every place in the Catskills, but we do have a lot of them mapped. And you can see that mountain fir forest occurs mainly at high altitudes above 3,500 feet. And it's composed mainly of balsam fir. And on this slide, you can also see some of the invasives that are mapped, mainly in the lowlands around them, and none in these intact areas of the forests at higher altitudes. So here's a shot of mountain fir forest on Black Dome Mountain. And again, mostly dominated by balsam fir, and there's some mountain ash there, and understory of a lot of seedlings of balsam and some other shrubs in there, and a few wildflowers, but a lot of mosses too. So there's a little red spruce that gets up in here, but it's mostly dominated by balsam. And as you get farther down, where it's not so windswept, above 3,000 feet, you get into the mountain spruce fir forest. So you have more red spruce, mostly dominated by red spruce with some balsam too. And you'll get yellow birch sometimes in there, and mountain ash, mountain maple, and a scattering of seedlings and saplings, some nice understory shrubs and wildflowers too. So here you might see something like Bicknell's thrush, one of the high altitude birds that is state rare, seen in the Adirondacks too, but also in the Catskills. And then on the upper right, you have muskroot, Adoxa, which is in its own family, Adoxaceae. And this is a small little plant, little flower there, greenish flower with the yellow stamens that occurs in the mountains there in the Catskills, sometimes at high altitude, sometimes a little lower. Oops, sorry. And then one of the invasives that we're concerned about in this habitat is balsam woolly adelgid. You're familiar with hemlock woolly adelgid. Well, there's also balsam woolly adelgid, which disfigures and sometimes kills balsam fir. And there is some of that up in the Catskills and also in the Adirondacks. Okay, and the another important natural community and harbor of rare species are these large forested roadblocks. And these are mainly beech maple music forest and hemlock northern hardwood forest. So these are not as rare in the state, but these are exemplary communities because they're so large and intact and don't have many roads in them. So we map those and show that they're really important in the Catskills. So here's an outline in red of a beech maple music forest in the town of Hardenberg. In the middle there is the Beaver Kill, and you can see that it encompasses a lot of the forest there without roads and just beautiful beech maple forest habitat. And most of the invasives that are mapped, here's Frost Valley down here at the southeast part. A lot of invasives mapped there. But most of the area is invasive free because it's very intact. and that's the way we want to keep it. Occasionally, you'll see an incursion of garlic mustard or barberry, and we're always concerned about that and trying to prevent that. Here's a shot of the beech maple music forest near Mongaup Pond. Again, dominated by American beech, sugar maple. Sometimes you get a little red maple in there. And some other subdominants like white ash, hophorn beam, red maple. But you have a nice shrub layer and ground layer, if it hasn't been too eaten by deer. We'll have ferns and nice spring ephemeral wildflowers. In some of the ravines and cliffs which have seeps on them, you get a rare plant called common roseroot, which is very rare in the state, and the best occurrences are in the Catskills. And here's a nice shot by Mike Adamovic of that in flower on a cliff in the Catskills. And Three Birds Orchid, which is again the largest and most populations in the state are in the Catskills. This is an S2, so state threatened. And it's a beautiful little thing that comes up mainly in August. When you get the first cold night in August, it'll come up all through the Northeast, actually. So it's really interesting little orchid. And then on the bottom left is the West Virginia white butterfly, which is a rare butterfly which thrives on those spring ephemerals, mainly toothwort, and is endangered because we're losing some of these understories of spring ephemerals, mainly to fragmentation and deer overbrowse. Now we're on the understory too. We're also worried about this slender false brome coming in, Brachypodium sylvaticum. This is an invasive grass which has come into western New York, and there is one occurrence in Dutchess County near Wappingers Falls. So we have to really be on the lookout for this slender false brome. There's some nice information about it on the Finger Lakes and Western New York PRISM websites. So check those out. And then also, of course, since white ash is in beech maple music forest, we're concerned about emerald ash borer. It's mainly in the eastern part of the PRISM, but we're worried that it's going to get into some of these areas too. Another large roadless blocks are hemlock northern hardwood forest. Here's one in the town of Denning and Rochester, north of the Rondout Reservoir. And these are also scattered within beech maple music forest. When you have big ravines, you'll get hemlock forests. But here's a nice intact block. And some invasives around it, but not many inside. Mostly hemlock, dominated by hemlock, 100% sometimes, down to 20%. Sugar maple, red maple, some birches, yellow and black birches, and some oaks too, chestnut, white oak, and occasionally you get white pine in here too. And then the ground layer isn't as full as the deciduous forest. It tends to be a little more sparse, but you do get some wildflowers in here too. Now on some of those ravines, you have some spectacular waterfalls, and one of those waterfalls supports, actually a couple of them support this Dryopteris fragrans, which is a rare fern that only occurs on the cliffs of these waterfalls or seeps that that come out of the rock. And it's just a beautiful Dryopteris species, sort of a blue-green color. And below that, you see balsam woolly adelgid. I'm sorry, that's not balsam, that's hemlock woolly adelgid. I mislabeled that. So hemlock woolly adelgid, since hemlock hardwood forests are mainly composed of hemlock, we're really worried about the effect that the woolly adelgid will have on them. And also, when the hemlocks die out, that are providing those cool microclimates for things like this Dryopteris, what's going to happen with that? One more is rocky headwater streams. These are really important for providing cool, clear water to those reservoirs and to parts downstream. These are cool, clear, low flow streams that occur at the tops of watersheds and usually confine, not many meanders and riffles. You have these pools and riffles that provide this nice, cool, clear water. And they also provide habitat for one of the premier wildflowers of the Adirondacks, and that's northern monkshood. You can see a little bit above the word stream there. There's a few along the bank there, those purple flowers. Here's a close-up, northern monkshood. This is also federally threatened, so it's on the federal list, and one of our most beautiful wildflowers. And to the right there is Japanese knotweed, and that's something that we don't want to get up into these headwater streams. Below the headwater streams, you'll have the rocky headwater streams, you'll have marsh headwater streams, and then confined rivers, other water bodies that, especially along the Delaware, where Japanese knotweed has really taken hold. So we don't want it to come up into these beautiful areas of rocky headwater streams and start affecting things like monkshood. Then there are a lot of rare and significant wetlands around the prism. You can see this list here, and we have a number of them mapped. Of course, there's many more here that are than we have mapped, but these are places where we have a number of rare species, rare plants and animals, and we want to protect these from mainly the aquatics and wetland invasive species that occur. So for example, here's a dwarf shrub bog up in northern Otsego County. And here is Donna Vogler and Connie Tedesco from SUNY Oneonta helping to survey this bog. And these are leatherleaf, mainly composed of leatherleaf under 1 meter high. Occasionally you get some trees in there or some taller shrubs, but mainly ericaceous shrubs in a peatland. So this is underlain by sphagnum in a depression. Sometimes you'll have a pond in the middle, sometimes you don't. This one actually doesn't, but these are just really amazing natural communities. This is rare statewide. It occurs around the state, and there are some huge ones in the Adirondacks, but this is a really nice one in Otsego County. And this one is a place where you can see southern twayblade on the right, Neodia bifolia, just a really delicate little orchid, beautiful orchid. And then on the left is golden club, which is just an amazing looking and plant that doesn't look like anything else, with these long green leaves and yellow spadixes. It's like a jack in the pulpit without the pulpit, just jack. And it's yellow, and then it sort of turns a little bit brown after that. So these are two that we don't want to be affected by any invasives, especially something like this, which is marsh thistle, which has come into a lot of the prism. This is Cirsium palustri. And Donna Vogler and her students have been doing a lot of work on this, controlling and inventorying for it. So there are a number of occurrences in Otsego County, but they wrote this nice paper on detection and control measures for it, and you can find this on the web also. And another thing that occurs in another dwarf shrub bog down in Sullivan County, Orange County, is this water wheel, Aldrovanda vesiculosa. And it's in one place only, and We're concerned that it will start spreading to other places around the state and around the prism. You can see it looks like utricularia or the bladderworts, but it actually isn't a bladder. It's more like a Venus flytrap at the end of those little whorled branches. And just want to keep your eye out for this thing in water bodies around the prism. So I'll finish off here with the last slide of the picture of the website of CRISP, and to report sightings of invasive species, but also if you ever come across any rare species, to report those sightings to us too. You can do it through iNaturalist, or you can email me, or we have a reporting form on our website you can report rare species to. I wish I could talk about all the rare species in CRISP, but there's just not enough time. There's so many beautiful ones. And on the lower left there is one of the most beautiful ones, that Jacob's ladder, Polemonium van Bruntii, which again is globally rare, but CRISP and the Catskills has the most populations in the world of this thing. So the other place where there's a few more occurrences is in the Tug Hill. Okay, I think I'll end it there. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Steve. That was excellent. There were some great photos and incredible information. I'm going to be posting, I'm recording this presentation, of course, and I'll be posting on the CRISP website, and I'm going to listen to it again. And you hit on some of the things that I was really interested in. It's also available if you know somebody that couldn't be here today, that they could watch this on our website. But especially knowing, looking at the rare species and rare communities, and what invasive species are threatening them, and then some indirect effects too of looking at maybe what the effect of hemlock woolly adelgid will be on hemlocks that are at the base of some of these waterfalls. Will that change the habitat enough so that you're threatening these rare species?
Right.
The other thing I just want to mention is, I think I mentioned it to you, Steve, but it will be working on CRISP strategic planning soon. We're preparing for that, and I think this is great information for us to consider when looking at strategies to deal with invasive species in the CRISP region.
Yep. That would be great. And just again, I want to thank everybody in CRISP and all the volunteers and partners for doing their work to preserve these rare species.
And thank you for doing that. So I don't see any questions in the chat. I see that Meg put in the website of the New York Natural Heritage Program, where some of the information that you were showing is housed. Does anyone have any questions for Steve that they, if you don't mind unmuting yourself, or if you wanted to type it in the chat about rare species or the threat of invasive species to rare species?
I got one quick question.
Go ahead, Jody.
Sometimes like for example, the Jacob's ladder, it's listed both G, I think it was G2 and G3, and then S2. So what's the story on having two global ranks?
Yeah, I didn't explain that, but that's it's called double rank, and it's the first rank is what we know about it, and so we're sure that it's a G3. Say it's a G3, G4, but we think it might be a G4. We think it's probably more common, but we don't have the information. So
Okay.
That's just sort of to hedge our bets that, yeah, it's probably a G4, but we definitely know it's a G3.
Okay.
More field work needs to be done for
Okay,
those.
thank you. There were some other ones like that too.
Yeah. Yep.
Are there other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Kate.
Thanks. I had recorded some Adoxa in iNaturalist the other week, but I didn't add it to the Rare Plants project. So I guess my question, Steve, is do you see those reports when they come in or only if they're added to that project specifically?
I see them in our collector project, so it'll show up there. And if you wanted to add more data, I could allow you to put it into our project. So you could just send me an email and say, yeah, I'd like to enter more information about it. So in our project, you can enter, abundance and surrounding area and different, associated species, things like that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Steve, I have a question. This is Meredith.
Hi.
Hey, do you ever do like timed alerts for rare species? Like if something's going to be in bloom and it's a particularly good time to look for it, do you ever do any kind of email blasts like that? Or is there a place to find that information?
Actually, if you look at the rare plant list that I showed, and you go on our website and download the rare plant list, in the back, it has the phenology of all the species. So you can see when the best time to look for them is.
Okay.
But I don't actually put out calls for them.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? One observation I had going to the water wheel site several times, and that occurs in a flooded bog. I bet it was a really amazing habitat at one point. But like you said, there's rare ecological communities around it, and there might be some rare species there too. But I wonder if do you think that, I mean, that was introduced, the water wheel that's there, but as these ecological communities are more manipulated, that's making them more susceptible to invasion. If something's flooded, either by that one, it's flooded by beavers now. Maybe it was flooded by humans at one point. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, I don't know if water disturbance is as serious as land disturbance, the soil disturbance, because I mean that happens all the time with beaver. So it's been happening for so long, and that was introduced by a collector who wanted to preserve that species, so it didn't really come in through disturbance. Yeah, I think more upland, in the uplands, it's much, well, as far as something that's isolated like that, it's not as big a deal. Once you start getting houses around a pond, then you're going to start getting more nutrients and things like that. So, and herbicides and whatever that goes into the pond, then you're going to have, you're going to make that habitat much more susceptible to introduction of invasives.
Yeah, I think for the most part in the higher elevations where we're looking at, and you pointed out some of the rare communities and rare species that depend on those communities, increased recreation might be an impact on those as we're getting more people coming to the Catskills, more people doing some of the trailless peaks and things like that. There's more people going off trail, and that's something that we were interested in taking a look at too.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of that in the Adirondacks, trying to figure out what's being brought in at trailheads and things like that.
Yeah, and something we'd like to do more here, definitely. So if anyone else has any questions, we could hang on with Steve here for a few more minutes, and if you wanted to unmute yourself or enter something in the chat. Otherwise, we could move on in the agenda here. I'm not seeing anything else, Steve, so I can let you go. I just want to thank you again for this great presentation. It's really valuable information and something that we really need to keep track of and consider when we're looking at the best ways to protect the Catskills.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks. And I don't know if I need to share the agenda, but I'm looking at it here. And the next thing I have on the agenda, Tom Algeier from the New York State Department of Ag and Markets wanted to give a little update. Tom always has some great insider information about things that are going on statewide. That's really helpful. And then after that, I think Meg from IMAPS wanted to give an update. So go ahead, Tom.
Sure.
Welcome.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. And thanks, Steve. Great information. So I know when Steve was talking, he mentioned about the borders there of CRISP, how it kind of touches on the, you know, the boundary between CRISP and Lower Hudson. And that's right where one of the spots in Port Jervis where we found spotted lanternfly last year. Despite quite a bit of new additional survey, no new sites in that area have been found. It's kind of an outlier, thankfully. It's not a very large infestation. So we continue to monitor that site, but no new egg masses and no new hatching have been found. Which leads me right into emergence. So the egg masses are hatching in Pennsylvania and in New York. Richmond County, we've had at least 3 sites in Richmond County where egg masses have been confirmed to have hatched out. So they are, it is that time of year. So, they're the first few instars, especially the very first instar, are very, very difficult to detect in the environment because they're so small. They're generalist feeders. They disperse themselves pretty well. So they're very hard to detect in the environment. When they first hatch, they'll be in little clusters and then they disperse from there. So that's kind of the stage we're at for spotted lanternfly. They're very much like the size of a tick at this point. So moving on from there. Sorry, my dog's making noise in the background. Moving on from there. So Westchester is really where our focus is now. There was a report from Connecticut, nothing on the New York side in Westchester, but on the Connecticut side on the state line, right near Westchester Airport. So we're kind of concentrating in that area right now, and we had been working with the USDA for treatment or a treatment plan because we cannot cross the border into Connecticut. Connecticut does not have any funds to treat in Connecticut. So the USDA was trying to do that, but they pulled the funding back that they had given them. So we're back to kind of square one with that. Very frustrating. In addition to spotted lanternfly, that's really all I have on that. I did want to mention that the Cooperative Agricultural Pest Survey Program, the CAPS program, which is a nationwide program. In our state, Mike Dorgan kind of heads that survey, but the visual and trap surveys are underway. So if you do see one of our insect traps while you're out there, that's what that's all about. They're kind of scattered throughout different locations throughout the state. Nothing on our 2021 CAPS target list has been detected yet in New York State, although box tree moth was confirmed on the Canadian side of the border. So we're kind of monitoring that situation. It's pretty far from the CRISP region, but we don't have it in New York yet, but we are monitoring that from the Canadian side. So that's taking up a little bit of our time as well. So that's really all I have. Thanks.
What do the CAPS traps look like?
They vary depending on the targets. Some of them are the Delta cardboard paper traps. Some of them are the Lindgren funnel traps, so the black tapered funnels. They're typically either 9 or 11 funnels kind of in a line mounted vertically with a cap. The cap sometimes is white, sometimes it's black, and there's usually a cup at the bottom, whether depending on the target, it's either a dry cup or a wet cup. Most of them are dry cups with a kill strip inside. However, they do use some wet cups which have like a low tox low tox. I don't want to say ethanol, but it's not ethanol. It's basically it's RV antifreeze, but it's not the same antifreeze you would use in your car. It's non-toxic. Well, it's toxic to insects, I guess. But so the wet cups use those. And they also do have some other traps depending on the other insects. We are also using some traps for spotted lanternfly. The preferred trap is a bag trap. So it's basically like a net bag that tapers down to a neck. So they climb up. They kind of get funneled through the neck, and then they can't come back out. But again, those are that's not part of the CAPS program as far as spotted lanternfly, but we do have those traps kind of dispersed throughout the state.
Great, thanks for that info, and good luck with all your work, and thanks for all the time that you guys are putting in and all the effort.
Yep, appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Meg Wilkinson, did you want to talk about IMAPs, or someone else from IMAPs there?
I think we're good.
Meg, there was a lot of echo. Did you say you're okay?
This and come over there.
Uh-oh, your audio is bad. Well, I did put on the agenda some IMAPS related things, including the SLF, so that's the Spotted Lanternfly Tree of Heaven training that's coming up on June 7th.
It's picking up that audio, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
I can hear you better now. You want to go ahead, Meg?
Sure. Why doesn't someone turn that phone down? Okay. There's a volume button on the right. Actually, you know what? Hang up there. I think they can hear us here. There.
I can hear you, but there's a little echo still.
There. Okay. Now, is it no echo?
Oh, yeah. Perfect. Go ahead. Yep.
Hear them. Oh, thanks, Mitch. I don't
Yeah, go
know. We
ahead,
can't
Meg.
hear them now.
Meg, can you hear me?
Okay. John, does that work?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks.
It took a team effort here because we've got a real phone and a computer, and anyway. All right, thank you. I will just mention a few things quickly. One, following up on Tom's mention of spotted lanternfly, we have a double event on Monday, one of the statewide events. 1 o'clock is a spotted lanternfly Tree of Heaven IMAP training. And at 7 o'clock, there'll be a special panel event with experts such as Tom available to answer questions. And there is a form when you register that you can submit your questions ahead of time. The next thing I'll mention, June 30th, we have our IMAP mapping challenge. I believe it's the 7th year. I think it's the 7th year. We have 5 species this year. It's going to run all of July. So tune in for that. You can participate, submit data to IMAP during that time period for one of the 5 species, and we'll have a tracker on our website. The other three quick things I'll mention, they're not specific dates. One is just to remind people to please help us. We have a focus this year specifically for water chestnut. So we are trying to make sure that any known locations for water chestnut are recorded in IMAP. And also, if people do polls, to record that as treatment data. And there's information on that on our webpage, and there will be a special webinar for that in June. I know many of you use the IMAP mobile app, and it will have a minor update in June. It should happen seamlessly as an auto update, but if you happen to have any trouble, please email us. And then last but not least, John, I know you're aware of this, but I thought I'd just mention it to this crowd again, in case anyone on here isn't aware of it. On the nyimapinvasives.org webpage, on the data and maps section, there's information on the species tier list that Dylan Finley did. And you can sort by CRISP and look at it, just the invasive species tier list for the CRISP region. So thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, John.
Thank you, Meg. Yeah, that's great stuff. And thanks for putting up those priority species lists. That's really helpful, and one that we'll refer to look at the prisms that are around us to see how our list compares to theirs. Did anyone else have any other updates or something coming up, or something that we really wanted to announce that they're doing for ISA or otherwise that they want people to know about? I didn't get anything else that I am aware that somebody wanted to let us know about, but I'll pause a few seconds to give somebody an opportunity. And I'm not hearing anything, not seeing anything in the chat. Just want to remind everyone that it is Invasive Species Awareness Week next week. We'll be posting a lot of information and a lot of stuff on Facebook and social media as the other prisms are. And it's a great opportunity, I think, because a lot of the trainings are offered remotely, and it gives people the opportunity to see what's going on, and not just the CRISP prism, but in the other prisms also. I wanted to, I guess we should wrap it up there. And I just wanted to, once again, thank Steve Young for his great presentation. That was a wonderful presentation to see just the richness and biodiversity that is in the Catskills and in the CRISP region. How much we do have to protect here, and how important it is that each of you is out there doing your job to help protect the Catskills from invasive species. So thank you for joining us for the CRISP Partners virtual meeting. As I mentioned earlier, I'll post a recording of this on our website, so you can listen to all the information that Steve gave. Once again, I know that I'd like to do that to hear more of these interactions of invasive species with rare species. I expect our next quarterly meeting will probably be in early September. When we get that date and a speaker lined up, I'll share that data on the CRISP listserv, on the CRISP website, and on our Facebook page. So with that, I'd like to once again thank Steve, and thank you all for your updates, and thank you for participating today. And I hope that you have a safe and happy summer. It's great to see you folks.
You too. Thanks, John.
Take care.